Hello, my name is Priscilla Gallegos. Before I begin, please excuse the way I talk. I have braces, and with braces come the retainers. So with that stated, let's get started. My person of interest is Alfred Marshall, an English economist. Today we are going to cover his early life up to his death, his main contribution to economics, and how it relates to us. I'm going to make it as beneficial as possible, not only because it's for a grade, but because I know how it feels to be watching a video for 20 minutes and only get a little bit of information. Alfred Marshall was born in London on July 26, 1842. He was the son of a cashier. He went to school at the Merchant Taylors' School and also St. John's College, Cambridge. He graduated in mathematics since that was his forte. Marshall experienced a mental crisis to which he switched to philosophy. He began with metaphysics, in which he turned to ethics, in turn led him to economics. Because, he states, economics played an essential role in providing the preconditions for the improvement of the working class. At Cambridge, they invited him to be a lecturer, in which he met his wife, a former student, and that was now another lecturer at the Cambridge Women's School. Marshall was the founder of the new economics. He rejected the traditional definition of economics as the science of wealth, to establish a disciplined concern for the social welfare. He became a principal and professor of political economy. Up until his retirement in 1908, Marshall dominated a singularly influential school of economics. From 1890 up until his death in July 13, 1924, Marshall was the patriarch of the new economics. Now, Marshall's contribution to economics. Marshall was a founder of neoclassical economics, which is a term variously used for approaches to economic focusly on the determination of prices, outputs, and income distributions in markets through supply and demand. The content and method of Marshall's economics were largely original, but his basic assumptions were derived from the 19th century belief that social reform depended initially upon the reform of character. He never doubted that every man saw his own, or at least his children's, best interests, that work purified human nature, stimulating personal and social progress, or that capitalism would be inherently progressive if it was made more efficient. Marshall's economic analysis began with the quasi-static, evolutionary institutions of free enterprise and developed as a search for measurable regularities in economic phenomena. Since money could be measured regularly, Marshall studied prices. Marshall's most important technical contributions were in price and value analysis. The value of things, which he recognized as necessarily relative and subjective, was expressed as money prices, which through an elastic play of forces behind demand and supply. Utility, Marshall says, the power of goods and services to satisfy consumers' wants, and demand fluctuated in relation to price. Price, in turn, was determined both by the cost of production and by judgments about utility, the two inseparable blades of the economic scissors. There you go. This book. Marshall's important book, Principles of Economics. His ideas helped modern economists today decipher the problems in our economy. Marshall also influenced other economists. My relation to Marshall's ideas and how it relates to us. Well, as a dual credit student studying economics, I could say reading what Marshall did, I learned a lot. Through him, I learned that the price and output of a good are determined by both supply and demand, and that on a graph where the intersect is the equilibrium. Here you see, we have a graph. And then we have supply, or, sorry, states that here in the middle, you would have an equilibrium, always, and supply and demand. Marshall also gets credit for coming up with the concept of price elasticity of demand, which is the buyer's sensitivity to a price. Consumer surplus is also another concept Marshall contributed to. Marshall states, price is typically the same for each unit of a commodity that a consumer buys, but the value to the consumer of each additional unit declines. A consumer will buy units up to the point where the marginal value equals the price. Therefore, on all units previous to the last one, the consumer reaps a benefit by paying less than the value of the good to himself. The size of the benefits equals the difference between the consumer's value of all these units and the amount paid for the units. So which in summary would be how to get consumer surplus and how it works. He also introduced the concept of producer surplus. Last but not least, Marshall also introduced the idea of the three periods. First is a market period, time for which the stock of the commodity is fixed. Second, the short period in which supply can be increased by adding labor and other inputs but not by adding capital. Marshall's term was appliances. And last but not least, the third period, the amount of time taken for capital, appliances to be increased. And that's it. I hope that it became beneficial. Thank you and have a good day.